All right, welcome everyone. This webinar is one of a series of webinars Scrum Alliance is hosting about Agile leadership. We are holding these monthly and you are able to obtain one SEU from each session. This webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to all who registered later this week, along with a PDF of the slide deck. After the presentation, you may ask questions at any time into the chat box on the left-hand side. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but if we miss any, we will work to get them out in the following weeks to this audience. We do understand that individuals experience technical difficulties at times, and restarting the webinar will usually solve these problems. If you are unable to do so, we will be sending out a recording so you don't miss this information. Our presenter today is Sesadri Venkataraman. Sesadri is a proven global professional with experience in various cultures, geographies, and influences. He has more than 15 years of industrial experience in research and development in the corporate sector and in the government research sector, including the DRDO, Gas Turbine Research Establishment, and CSIR, National Aerospace Laboratories. Sesadri holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a postgraduate diploma in international business. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Sesadri. Sesadri, go ahead and let's begin the presentation.
Yes, Jack. Thank you so much. I would want to really thank you for having given me an opportunity to share my little thoughts on what I consider as... Hello, are you able to hear anything?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
So, I get a chat from a person saying I'm unable to hear anything.
Oh, yes, we will be able to, we will monitor those. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So thank you so much, Jack, for having given me an opportunity to present my thoughts on what I consider as an embracing change for the better, which is nothing but your IQ, EQ factor. And first of all, let me wish each and every one of you a very good morning, a very good afternoon, and a very good evening. I would also really want to talk about something which I'm sure each and every one of us would have experienced in some form or the other in our lives, and the next few slides over the next 40 to 45 minutes will be talking about what is it that we can do to change an ordinary to the extraordinary, and where is it that this delta factor is coming in from, so that that small ordinary becomes an extraordinary one, and where the person who says I cannot do something will be the person who will be doing something that is fathomably unimaginable, because that is something which is a state of the mind. Okay? So with this, let me run over to the next slide where we talk about the free-thinking man, and where we see a person who is not bounded by much constraints. I'm not getting it much into the graphics of the presentation, but what I actually wanted to talk about this is a picture of a person who is hanging with his foot, let's say around 200 feet above the ground. Typically, many people say, or it is human thinking to say that this is not possible. We will crash, we will die, our neck will be broken, our back will be broken. But there is something which made this man say that this is possible, let me try. And the net result after all that he tried is he was able to stand like this, and the photo is what I have put up here, and this is something which I will be using to describe what is it that we describe as the agile factor to the agile IQ, EQ factor, which is present in the forthcoming slide. The next slide will actually be talking about what is agile in a common term, and all genes inclined to overcome the I factor. This I, which we see, is a very strong factor. It says, I can do this, I can do that. But invariably, if you are not able to do something with I, then that I actually becomes a very weak letter in the English alphabet. That is why the next thing that follows that is lessening the E or the ego factor of any given individual. And any time for an agile program, an individual is given not that much of an importance, but the collaborative or the cross-functional team where the transition comes from the I towards the E factor comes, and which is why we talk about involving, imbibing, and incorporating, thereby leveraging the engagement, the empowerment, and an energizing factor of any perennial winning team. See, the whole thing is when we have transferred from an individual mindset to a collaborative mindset, that by itself is a large transformation, and which is highly essential for any organization where the dynamics of change is highly unpredictable, and this will be seen in the subsequent slide as a representative. How many of us would want to picture ourselves? How many of us want to picture ourselves in the first picture, and how many of us is what we want to be in the second picture? This is something really nice, right? Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to succeed. Everybody wants to display or flaunt off whatever they have won and how they can pose themselves in front of photographs. But for them to pose in front of the photograph, how much of that I versus that we has transitioned will actually be seen in the forthcoming slide, where we will be talking about a couple of very small exercises to help us understand that this is a small thing which has actually been inhibiting our thoughts, our degrees of freedom when it comes to looking at a problem statement, or what is it that we can do to make that bit of ordinary towards a little more ordinary. From there, we transition ourselves to an extraordinary presentation. Okay, for the next slide, we will be seeing and trying to understand how many of us want to win every time. How many of us want a winning habit?
We're going to go and begin with the first question. How many of us? Mm-hmm.
There I see the responses going up. Very good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and open this poll for a few more seconds.
Sure. The numbers are going up. We see everybody wants to be a winner. And there are very few people who say, I want to fail. But then we will see. We will try to understand a retrospect on why the numbers are less and why the winning numbers are more.
No, it's like we're at 75% yes.
Yes, it's 177 as a winning poll and a no as a 58. So the number is still going up.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll right here, looking at 75.6% yes.
So everybody wants to win. Fantastic. So all of us in this presentation are all born winners. And yes, the people who have actually told no will definitely transition into a yes down the line, because they see that losing at times help us understand that this was not the path meant for victory. This was not meant the path for victory. Then down the line, we will be able to understand what is it that takes to understand the fine difference of element, and if there is anything called as a failure or success for that matter. Yes, there is something called as success, but what is it that is actually ingrained in failure is what we will be seeing in the next poll. How many of us want winning a perennial habit? We will open up a poll for that. You do see the responses going up.
Looks like we have 214 so far. Most of the responses right now are yes.
22.
give it a few more seconds.
Okay.
And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll right now, and we're looking at around 87%
So
for
winning
yes, and then 13% for no.
And 13% yes. Okay. So we will now try to understand what is the fine difference between 87 and 13, and with that we will be able to have some level of mutual participation from our participants. All that we need to understand is a sheet of paper, a pen or a pencil. Okay? And the objective of this exercise, which is present in the next slide, is about understanding the five-finger syndrome. What is there in the five fingers of each and every one of us? Let us do a small exercise with the five fingers in here. Please take a look at all the five fingers of the hand, and let us try to understand if the dimension of finger 1 is the same as finger 2, finger 3, finger 4 for that matter. It is just a simple fact that none of the five fingers of your hand are equal in dimension, and all of them are unequal in dimension. Let us just try to have a weird thought. If all the fingers of the hand are of equal dimension, will I be able to get a better hand? Or is it something that I can be more successful from what I am actually at this point of time? The next few slides will be trying to understand what is it that takes any individual to scale to that level of success, and what is it that any individual would be going through, whether it comes to a change or whether it comes to a transformation or whether it comes to understanding the element of resistance when it comes to a temporary change versus a permanent change. Now, what is it that we need to understand in here is the five fingers of your hand of any individual are not equal in dimension. And if an organization which is comprising around 3 lakh individuals, how many fingers will they be seeing? Don't you think that is a large scalable problem which every one of us would need to go through to understand that this is what you need to understand for you to understand that transformation is not working with like-minded individuals. It is like working with unlikely minded individuals who share different thoughts, different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences, and all these five entities put together form the five fingers of your hand, and this will be explained with a very, very small exercise, and this is going to be the agenda of the presentation. The number 1 would be the obligation for transformation, the transformation dilemma. Why is it transformation is always considered as a pain in the wrong place? And what does it take to understand something called as a change factor? And most important of all, the agile mindset and the inception to what you actually consider as a transformation route, with some very small activities, some conclusions, and we will close the session with a Q&A. Okay? So let us go ahead to understand what is it that is considered as an obligation for transformation in the forthcoming slide. This is something which I would like to give you all as a small exercise. A typical customer requirement statement. You have 9 dots in this picture. The user story for this would be, I want all the 9 dots to be connected with just 4 lines, and all the 4 lines will have to be drawn with lines of the paper. First requirement. The second requirement is overwriting of these lines is just not permitted. The time box is 180 seconds. Shall we start now? Is it good enough to
Yes,
go for
go
the
ahead
opinion
and
poll?
now. All right. We're going to go for an opinion poll and decide, is this possible, not possible, or maybe?
Requirements are, you have 9 dots. 9 dots have to be connected with 4 lines. And the 4 lines will have to be done without lifting your hands off the paper. overwriting of the lines is not permitted, and the time box is 180 seconds. The time starts now. What has already started? Yes. You see the opinion polls going up in numbers?
Yes, right now we have nearly 200 so far right now, about mostly yes. We see about 20 for no, and then 55 for maybe.
So we do have participants who say it may be possible. Some of them say it's not possible. We do have numbers who say it is possible. So are we nearing the 180-second time box?
Let's see. Let's give maybe 1 more minute, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually go back to the instructions if anybody needs that.
Well, I think you may want to, yeah. Numbers more or less attaining stability. Closing the poll?
Yes, so let's go ahead and, so this was the final ever for the polls, about 64% saying it's possible, about 10% no, and then 26% maybe. Should we go on to the next slide?
Yes, so more or less we have attained a metric of stability. We will go ahead and close the poll. Yes. These are some of the patterns which most of our friends would have come up with, or at least these are all the patterns which were seemingly come up during a couple of participants with whom I had an opportunity to interact with in a couple of my earlier sessions. And when they say it is possible, they say it is possible, partially possible, may not be possible. Some of them say this crisscrossing of the lines is given as an incorrect requirement. This is something you have conjured up from imagination. How can we do something which is just not possible? This is a challenge. Now, the outcome is this. Line 1, line 2, line 3, and line 4. I do not know if there's something missing in line 1. But if you see, all the 9 dots are connected using just 4 lines, and there are 2 points which have been intentionally constructed outside line 1 and line 3, by virtue of which we were able to connect all the 4 lines, and this has become the connection for all the 9 dots which we have given. Shall we do a retrospect? Shall we do a retrospect? We do have a couple of questions coming in here, but then we will do a retrospect. The next coming slide will be talking about the retrospect. Yes, so how many of us actually studied the problem under consideration? How many of us read through the problem? How many of us read through the question? How many of us saw through what is it that could be done versus just rejecting the question saying, this is just not possible with the conditions given? If you look at it, how many of us actually felt that this 9-dot boundary condition is just given as a delimiter? It is just not a be-all and an end-all of a requirement. This requirement is just what I am giving as a requirement. It is fine if I am able to see 4 lines connected without the lines being crisscrossed. Why is it that this 9 dot became an inhibition in our thinking factor? And the most important fault here is how many of us actually solved a problem and how many of us were trying to solve the problem. A trial may actually deter you from solving the problem. But if I fold my sleeves and say, I am going to solve this problem, you will solve the problem. There is no if or there is no but on that. The most important thing which we need to understand here is, apart from the 9 dots, the 2 dots which are given as an extra outliers is actually the hidden solution pointer. It is something that has actually directed you to the solution. Typically, if you observe this, this is done to help us overcome the regular linear thinking paradigm towards something that is non-linear. To understand, an Agile program is a program where you are dealing with a lot of uncertainties, and an uncertain way of approach is what will actually help uncover what is it that is uncertain. There are areas where certainty is seen. However, to a large extent, an uncertain program is implicative of fact that any method under the sun is open to be tried under, and anything that actually solves a problem given by a customer is something that actually works out. There is nothing called as a single size shirt or a pant which fits every human being in this universe. And this slide is what will actually explain us what is it that has actually prevented us from connecting all the 9 dots to all those people who actually told no, to those people who actually told yes. That small bit of thinking in that ordinary towards an extra is what you call as an extraordinary. For all the information to the participants, this 9 dot syndrome was actually given to professors from big universities, and on a scale of 1 through 5, 2 professors actually came up with the solution. They were not able, the remaining of them were not able to come up with the solution. They told it could not be solved. The same problem was actually given to a second standard student, and he did it. So what does it mean to say? We need to understand that there is something that becomes a delimiter to the thinking, and that delimiter is actually an impediment when it comes to execution of any problem that is given by any customer. And this actually lands us into what you call as a customer or a transformation dilemma. Will this technology transformation make my industry or a position irrelevant? Will this R&D investment and innovation help me? And in the first place, why should I actually transform my business? For all said and done, I have been delivering value to all my customers, and why is this there is a change in pattern? The most important thing is, at this point of time, I need to introspect what is it that my competitors are doing to deliver solutions at a low cost. Do I need to revisit, or do I need to alter, or do I need to inject some fresh thought of blood to ensure that I am coming up with something new? And will an agility in business practice make my position irrelevant? In most cases, the bottom line is, if the problem is not broken, don't fix it. However, we need to understand, is this problem where we defined as a solution, is it actually delivering what a customer wants today? The most important thing is, when we are designing artillery, ammunition, and weapons to fight tomorrow's war, and the situation is such that weapons that were designed today have become irrelevant tomorrow, how come weapons that were designed 20 years back be able to solve tomorrow's problem? And that gives us an explanation of why I can wow my customer with a solution at an incredible price. Now, let us take a look at these 4 pictures. The first picture actually describes the wheel, the first invention, or the invention which makes man life easy. The second picture actually depicts the bogie of a cargo aircraft. The third picture depicts a glider. The fourth picture depicts a turbofan engine designed 380 aircraft which can fly from the Singapore to the Los Angeles non-stop. What is it that we see as a pattern in here? If we do some understanding on what is it, all the 4 entities are connected by a small entity called as the wheel. However, can I use the same wheel which I see in picture 1 to carry the bogie of the cargo aircraft, or will this same wheel can be used for a glider, And will this wheel be able to talk about designing an aircraft which can fly at 55,000 feet above the ground? It's not possible. This invention was done to take care of a problem that existed at that point of time. And the tubeless aircraft has been designed to take care of a requirement that has for the cargo aircraft or for a large size body of an aircraft. Now, you need to understand that if there is a solution, it may fit the bill of requirements of any given customer. However, if it does not fit, we may want to take only what is relevant. As I mentioned earlier, no single shirt or pant fits every human being or every creation on the earth. You may have to come up with something new, and that actually describes the school of agility, where we transition from a realm of known knowns towards known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. The next slide will actually help us understand what is it that was actually taken up as an invention and where is it that we have landed with the present day invention. Do you see connecting pattern? This is a hurricane lamp. It is a source of light. You can see a bulb, a tungsten bulb, and you can also see a fluorescent bulb. All three are sources of light, but can you use the same lighting source to solve your customer's requirement? A hurricane lamp is actually coming into picture only when there is no source of power. However, if there is a source of power, then it is good. It makes human common sense to dispose the hurricane lamp and come up with electricity. And today, when power conserving is in norm, coming up with a requirement where power conserving and luminescence is the order of the day, which has actually transcended to what you call as a fluorescent lamp. Now, let us talk about a second requirement as well, where you see the phone, which was actually first designed by Graham Bell. Today, we see this as a phone which is connected across 200 floors of an office. The third thing is a smartphone, which every Tom, Dick, and Harry has. What do you think is a common pattern here? All of them are telephones. All of them do the same thing, communicate, and you are also able to collaborate if there is a need. The first phone, which was designed by Graham Bell, does not have a conference facility. The second phone does not have a video facility. The third phone does offer a video facility where I am able to connect everyone across the world. Now, this is what you call as a turning of a possibility into a meaningful action, which implies that unless I dispose and throw away whatever I found out in the past way back, I will not be able to arrive at something called as a change. And unless there are multiple instances of change which are not reversible, it is not possible to do something called as a transformation. The hurricane lamp towards a bulb and the telephone towards a smartphone are just indicators of what a transformation enigma is all about. And unless any business that creating a possibility into a meaningful action, it is just not possible to understand what is it that actually describes a transformation, which cascades into the following slide as a change rule. Now, to define change, this is a factor that is all existent in the universe, and this is the only thing that is actually constant. It rules, it shall rule, and it shall continue to rule. This is the perennial rule of time, and this rule is non-negotiable. There are people who say that I can thwart change, I will prevent change, I will not allow agility to enter into the organization. For all of those who actually say that, I have something to beg and help them, make them understand. First of all, if there is a resistance to change, it is very normal, because as humans or as creatures who can think, the change factor is actually accompanied by a comfort factor which does not allow us to change, and which puts symptoms of question mark saying, will any alteration from your existing sequence lead you into what you call as a comfort factor? If this comfort factor is destroyed, then I do not want that change. The whole thing is all about understanding what is it that we need to do to accept change willingly, because a willingness to change will help you unfold that change is always for the better, and it will always help us understand that this change is something which we thought of as negative. However, it has landed us into something which we did not even think of. The best example for that is a wheel which was found way back, and this wheel was the first invention. However, the same wheel cannot be used for a bogie of an aircraft or for a large size aircraft, is something which we need to understand. And the second thing is, for us to understand what it takes to understand a change is imbibing the change, understanding the factor that the change is difficult. It cannot be done. However, you have to accept that, and once you accept the fact, you tend to become a proponent of a change, or you become a torrent of that change. The bottom line is, change is always for the better. It is a bold statement. However, things have always improved ever since something called as a change factor came in, because the dynamics of change is always something that's the only thing which is permanent. And lack of acceptance to the fact that there is something which is called as a change, which is always a better, is a big challenge. Now let us try to understand what is it that can help us understand a change from an individual transition towards a group transition. These are two entities or representatives of an C-level leadership. You see, there's a thinker who always wants to look at something from a different perspective, who wants to inject a concept of change in the organization. And then you have people who are carrying out the orders, or who are carrying out the instructions per the leadership, and who say this can be done, that cannot be done, or who do something to say that this change aspect cannot be done in this aspect. However, the whole thing which we need to understand is the top-down approach is something that is always an accepted norm, because the first person to feel value of the business is the person who's sitting at the leadership. The person sitting at the mid-segment may have a feeling that this can be done, there may be challenges in getting it done. However, if the customer requirement is such, there should be done in such a way that you can show that this can actually be done to a certain extent. This has been achieved only to this much. However, there are areas which cannot be done. And for us to come up with the three gradients of what has been done, what will be done, and an action plan to understand, or a via media to understand how it can actually be done, is what we are doing as an action plan to convert the change resistors into change evangelists. How many of us actually thought that the first phone, which was invented by Bell, would not be even existent today? Today we see something as a smartphone. Bell would have not even thought that the phone which was discovered that day would not even be existent today, because the change or the requirements of the customers evolved over time, and the business solution which we had on that day may not be the answer to today's challenge. Now, to understand this, we need to understand something called as an emotional intelligence factor, which is there on the forthcoming slide. Some of the changes are factored in all these statements, from a vendor or a supplier to a business partner. Once upon a time, we were only talking about vendors and suppliers. Today, we talk about business partners, or people who work with you to ensure that you partner along with the success and you learn from the previous mistakes. The second thing is, I alone used to profit. And that is why we told from the I towards the we factor, my profits alone to my customers and we ourselves. From a parent provider to an empty nester, this is a common challenge. A parent, the next 4 lines are just representatives of what a parent provider would actually depict. A father to a father-in-law, a mother to a mother-in-law, and I think the last two is something which I'm sure, which everybody of us would be knowing, and the last one is something which I'm sure, which everybody will definitely appreciate. To understand what it is to have a change, we cannot let down any of our stakeholders. You have to live with all our stakeholders, because there is value that will be delivered at every coefficient of our delivery with all the stakeholders, howsoever positive or negative that they may offer. The bottom line is, at every point in time, there is something that is accrued as a value in learning, irrespective of who the contributor of fact is, and that will actually cascade on to the next slide, which will help us understand the common impediments to a change factor. The I factor. He spoke about I. In a couple of organizational challenge programs which I had an opportunity to work with, the first question that was actually posed to me was, how will you help overcome the transformation dilemma? What will be the first thing that you will be controlling as a matter of fact when you are running through any organizational challenge? The most commonly answered question is, we will work with the project teams, we will work with the teams here, we will work with the stakeholders, we will work with whoever it is. However, when I wanted to go ahead and describe what is it that is actually seen as a challenge is the I factor. If I don't change, if I don't respond, if I don't understand your requirements, how can I evangelize the change factor? The people, both in the office and socio-personal life, have all people who are having 5 different fingers. We need to understand that the 5-finger syndrome is something that comes into every act of human life. And that 5-finger syndrome is the prime reason why the people behave the way they behave, the people interact the way they interact, and the people react or respond the way they normally react to or respond to. And in all those transitional factors, we need to understand that the customer mindset and the stakeholder mindset is what we see as from my profit towards our victory, from our supplier pattern to a vendor pattern to a business partner. The whole thing takes a dramatic turn when I say that I am not disjointed from you. You and I shall collaboratively work together. You and I shall help understand the customer's problem together to understand that a collaborative factor is all that actually helps win over uncertainties in life. In all our schools or in all our educational colleges, we were taught to be competitive. However, that competitive factor in thinking will help you attain a reasonable degree of marks or scores in your academic institution. However, the first thing that you encounter from a college or an educational institution towards an organization is a cooperative factor. From a competition to a cooperation is what you call as a college to a corporate transition, which normally takes around 6 months to a minimum for any normal individual. I at least had some opportunities to talk to some individuals to understand why does it take around 6 months in the minimum, why not it take something less. The human mind understands that if there is a scenario or if there is something that is different in the environment to what you have been accustomed to in the past, it takes a minimum of 3 to 4 months for you to understand all the requirements that were in place, does a comparison chart, and then it comes up with its own backlog of items on what is it that will be there in the present office. It does a predictive analysis. What could be there, what could not be there, how can I go ahead to understand that this mindset, will it help me understand this present day challenge? This mindset, will it be able to help understand the customer's problem, and will I be able to course along with my present course in thinking? Now, from a cooperative mindset to a collaborative mindset is what we are primarily required to do when we are working across programs which seem across uncertainties. An uncertain program will need a lot of change resistance to be done away with. Learning, unlearning, seeing, unseeing, doing, undoing. The opposites of life which we commonly encounter is something that we really need to understand that this is not the way to do business where the requirements are dynamic. And this is something which I will be going ahead to help understand in the forthcoming slide where we talk about the people. The technologies fail you, never mind, something else is always there, because you may have misplaced a do and a while statement in a while and a do statement. The reaction may be erroneous, it may not give you the right output. However, if the people who are actually coming up to do what your change factor is all about, and if they let you down, then you are in real soup. At least I had an opportunity to work with meaningful supervisors in the past, and they told me that your technologies fail you, Sesh. It may not be something really bad after all. you can always undo that. However, if the people with whom you are working with and the people who work for you let you down, then no amount of technology will be able to replace that backfill. You need to understand that the PR, or the personal relationship coefficient, is an all-pervading factor, and you need to have that really clear in mind. And this is because people comprise your life, either in office or in personal life, and your mindsets, the emotionals, the personal experiences, both in office life and in personal life, their knowledges, the way they look at things, their perceptions are all the 5 different entities which talk about the 5-finger syndrome, and what you say may not be exactly a reflective of what you think. And what you think and what you say and what you do may not actually be in a straight line, because there is something called as a difference in pattern in thought. So we need to understand that to help understand why is it that a tough time never lasts, but tough people do, because it is people with whom you are interacting with in tough times. And with this, let us go ahead to understand the mindset and transformation of a manager's metamorphosis towards becoming an inspiring leader. What is it that actually is the fine delta between a leader and a manager? It is a cycle. See, let us say we have a discussion in a closed room and we have a session, and it is observed on most instances, at least I've had people who actually openly admitted this to me, that I had this discussion, I'm going to leave this discussion in the room, I just don't care. But that is actually called a physical connection. Now, if I'm mentally connected to you, I will know what is it that you're going to think, and if I'm having you in my thought, the minute I leave out of the room, then I have made that bit of a difference, because I have connected with you. I have wired myself mentally to you before I communicate to you. And if I mentally communicate to you, you will be receiving my messages even when I'm offline, because you're constantly thinking over what I have told you. And that is because I have valued you, because I have valued myself. The third thing is I have empathizing factor towards you. I know why you are behaving the way you are. Yesterday you have been delivering value to me. Today you have not been doing the same thing what you have done yesterday. The reason is, yesterday you were working on a program where the requirements were not dynamic. Today there is a drastic change in the world of requirement, and you need to come up with something that can satisfy today's requirement. Then you need to have a different school of thought which can inspect and adapt constantly towards what you call as a customer's requirement backlog. And this is something where I acknowledge that you have a discomfort factor. Because you have a discomfort factor, I also have a discomfort factor. Because as much as I value myself, I value yourself. And all the more important, I am not an expert. And I do agree that with you and I working together, we can acquire the necessary expertise. And when our customer wins, it is a group winning, which is actually depicted in the slide number 4, where we spoke about a winning team. There was a person running in silo where he crossed a winning boundary. And there were 4 people who were holding the flag of the United States, and they were proclaiming their victory. This is what I have depicted when we say, when all of us win, our customer wins. And when our customer wins, all of us win. It's a reversible reaction where I understand that the collective sport, the collective and the collaborative reaction and the winning chain is what actually transcends towards a program where I do not know where the requirements are. But if I've delivered what my customer wants, despite the fact that there is uncertainty in its requirements, then we have struck the winning boundary. And the most important thing is, the change journey is difficult. Of course, it is difficult. But if you and I work together, we can definitely work out an action plan by which we can overcome the difficulty then, now, and with time to come. To understand what is it that a change journey is all about, we will be talking about the arrowhead syndrome in the forthcoming slide. How many of us have actually seen an arrow? I'm sure everybody would have seen an arrow. And does everybody acknowledge the fact that an arrow is as effective as its arrowhead? Yes. Only an arrow is as effective as its arrowhead, because the sharpness of the arrow decides how effective the winning target will be. Now, if I'm going to actually translate that into our winning team, the team is only as effective as its close bondedness is. as close thinking process it can accumulate, and as collaborative and as close-knit and well-knit it is. Because a well-knit team is a source of success. It can clearly understand what a customer can understand, and there is no uncertainty or there is no disacknowledgement of fact that this is what I told, this is what I understood, because there is clear line of communication. I am not using a process and tool. I am directly looking at you straight in the eye and I am understanding, is this exactly what you want versus what you want? So when I understand what you exactly want, I will work on coming up with a solution that can actually address value. Now, that will help us understand the arrowhead corollary to understand that this is what we need to look at as a reality in life when we are going through a customer statement which is not clear, which is uncertain. Sharpness of the arrow is actually an indicator of focus. Now, a Scrum team or any Agile team, when it gets together to do the daily event of Scrum or any Agile event for that matter, it is all about understanding that close bondedness and to understand that an energy stream is well set internally which cannot be disrupted. If there is an energy pattern that exists along the members of the Agile team, that energy factor stays in the team, and that energy actually indicates focus. And if there is any external impediment or if there is any external disrupting factor that can actually be taken care of, this is actually done during course of our daily Scrum event, which can be shaved off now and then, and that actually depicts how effective we are in solving any customer's requirement from any given backlog. And this shall be depicted in the next slide, where we talk about a target winning. We need the members, we need what is it to have focus, and we also need the goal. Either of these three, if they are less in composition, will not give the intended result. We need a bow, we need an arrow, also we need a target. So unless there is clear focus on what we exactly need and how are we exactly going to align all the requirements, connecting the needy and the non-needed, this winning may not be a clear possibility, but it takes maturity, it takes refinement, it takes understanding that this is how we can design the electric bulb, this is not the way we need to design an electric bulb, and all those collective attempts together coagulate. And this is where the next slide, you see an archer striking what you call as towards a target, because he has done the course correction as per the wind direction. He knows there will be an impediment in that direction. He knows for sure this kind of an impediment will surely arise. This is where you will be stuck down. This is where you will be bogged down. These kind of questions will come from a vendor. These kind of questions will come from a stakeholder. So once he has done all of that, all of those introspections during subsequent events, mastered that time and again, practicing one every now and then, and putting all the lessons learned into practice, the subsequent slide actually talks about what it takes from an archer who is actually pointing towards a target, towards the winning target. More or less self-explanatory? So we have brought all of it together, the bow, the arrow, and the target. The focus is actually indicated on how we can effectively strike the goal. And the minute you strike the goal, you know that all of these learning lessons have actually gone in for you to come up with this winning bit. And this winning lesson is what you can take back as a lesson so that you can practice the same thing as a lesson learned towards a successful story. And for all this, we need what we see in the subsequent slide, which is cooperation, collaboration, constancy to purpose, constant practices, constant rehearsals, and most important of all, continuous learning and continuous retrospectives by which we can actually integrate whatever we have learned. In effect, what is it that we are doing is we are actually integrating all our learnings into an activity called as a continuous integration, and we learn, we understand that this was not the way to do business in the present day trend, and this is the way we need to actually do a bit of a change so that the winning becomes a habit. If you see the same example of a bow and an arrow, The bow and arrow is used by people who are there in the forest. The bow and arrow was something that was used by all the warriors in the ages ago. However, when we are looking at today's electronic warfare, the same bow and arrow may not be a very relevant weapon of an ammunition when you are fighting with a customer. However, if you look at the concept of a bow and arrow, you are studying the course correction of the wind, you are understanding the target, and you are also knowing what are all the possible impediments that can come in way of the target for you to prevent that failure. Let us take an example of a laser-guided bomb missile using an infrared technology. It can fight in the night. It does the same focus. It does it with laser-sharp precision. It knows what are all the impediments that can come, and it does everything possible to thwart any unwanted behavior so that what is actually indicated as an end result of the customer is actually done. However, we have applied the same principle of the bow and arrow towards the laser bomb missile. The same thing, if it is just altered towards what we have been doing today as a lesson learned from what we have done yesterday, is what actually constitutes as success. The forthcoming story, I would like to wrap it up with a small example as a conversation between a lock key and a hammer. There was a key and there was a hammer and a key, and the hammer was telling, do you know, I am such a powerful creation. I am made of forged steel. I can crack any lock in this world. I can do anything possible. I can break the head of the lock. And then it asked, the reason why I am initiating this conversation with you is to understand, how come you are so puny to me, but you are still able to crack anything? The key just laughed at the hammer and told, you try to break a person's head. I touch the heart. And when the key told that, the lock was also saying, yes, he does touch my heart, and this hammer breaks my head. The hammer in turn replied, you are good. You know how to touch the heart. You know how to get things done without much frustration by just getting done things in a collaborative fashion. However, when there is something, you need to understand that the same breaking of the head is not a sin. You need to understand at some point of time, I need to break the head, because if I'm going to just touch someone's heart, it may not be an answer to everyone's problem. The same question, the same answer can be addressed either by touching a person's heart or by breaking someone's head. And this is all I have as what I would like to present to you all today. Jack, can we go ahead and open the opinion poll for Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. So if you do have a question for Cecidrine, thank you, for the presentation. Please enter them into the questions. Please enter them into the chat window, and then we will be sure to get to them. We did get a question earlier about the I cubed, E cubed acronym, and could you just explain that one more time?
Sure. Can we go to the same slide number 2?
This slide right here, or the next one?
Place where I think it's the slide number 3.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Slide number 3. Just an acronym which I have coined to understand that the I as a factor is something which becomes an impediment in itself. When I say that I can do it, I will do it, you are not taking the opinion of the the person who is sitting next to you, because in any program which involves agility, I as a factor is good to have, but it is not something that is all pervasive. If there is something that I can learn from the person who is sitting next to me, it is something that we can commonly understand as a collaborative spirit is something that truly wins over cooperation, and a cooperative spirit wins over competition. However, for me to understand that a collaborative spirit is truly the winner, you need to pass through the stations of competition, cooperation, and collaboration for you to really understand. And for you to understand that this collaborative spirit is something as a winner is something that comes only by practice. It is not something that I can teach you all or instruct you all overnight. It's something that comes up as a self-learning entity. Does this answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for doing that. We just received the question, how do you get buy-in from an organization that doesn't want to adopt Agile?
Yes. This is a very good question and a very relevant question though. We need to understand there's an organization which has been delivering some business value to customers, and the customer says, I am happy with your solution. When you are actually transcending from a requirement where there is a set of known knowns and known unknowns, known known to known unknowns, a traditional mindset will actually work. I know that this is how my customer will think, this is how my customer will interact. So I do not need to put too much of my brain into thinking. I will just go ahead and deliver what my customer requires at that point of time, because the change is anticipated or less and it comes in as a change request. I just get done with that. However, we need to understand something which is called as a Synaphin framework, which is actually covered in our Scrum Master and a Product Owner courses, where you talk about a problem statement in 4 different categories. One is a predictive, the other is a complicated, the third is a complex, and the fourth is a do-it-yourself. Now, to help understand where a problem is complicated versus complex, you are actually taking a dive between 2 zones where you're dealing with known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and unknown knowns. For you to understand where the customer exactly wants to steer his vehicle onto, you cannot use a traditional mindset to do, because you are in the same boat as the customer is, and the customer is also thinking along with you. So how is it that you can answer the problem which the customer has thought of today with something that existed yesterday? This is primarily intended for an organization where change is the key, where the requirements are dynamic. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. We received the question: how do you address the team manager who is resisting the transition and spreads discontent among his subordinates?
There are primarily 4 stages. See, and we need to understand there is something called as a cone of uncertainty. During the beginning of any Agile program, the requirements are uncertain, the outputs are uncertain, you exactly do not know what a customer wants at this point of time. In other words, you are constantly inspecting and adapting what a customer exactly wants, saying, hey, this is what I have come up with a strip of value, is this what you want? The customer comes up to you and says, this is fine, but as far as the other requirements are concerned, I am not really looking at it for now. Let us actually position it for something later. So at this point of time, you have got 2 points. You have scored 2 points on our 5 requirements. And with that winning background, you are going ahead and trying to do a course correction on the other 3 requirements. And the customer says, no, I do not want either of these 3 requirements. Let us come up with something new. Now, over time, as the customer's requirements, the customer's mindset, and the customer's product evolves, you also evolve. That is where we spoke about from a vendor or a supplier towards a business partner. You need to understand and think from a customer's perspective as to what his problem statement is. The customer has come to you for a solution because he has a problem. And you are here because the customer thinks you can definitely come up to a solution. You can come with a problem statement to a solution. And that is where you need to introspect as close as possible. Stay in close touch with your customer. And that is where your customer collaboration praise you dearly.
Excellent. We have time for one more question, and this question comes from Samit. In your experience, how long has it taken, for example, such as a Fortune 500 company, to transition from Agile to Agile I cubed, E cubed?
It's a very, very good question and a very relevant question. To answer this question, it is all about how dynamic and how fast are our team members susceptible to change. And if an organization which has been running really dynamic along with the customers, and if they have been constantly accustomed to the change in thought, then it is something that can be done instantly, let us say within a month or 3. However, where the organization is actually seeing the change as something different, then it may take longer than 3 months. 3 months is something that we can take as a ballpark number for coming up and addressing the change factor. The I cube, E cube factor equally takes much more than 3 months, and it is a stage of maturity because the 3 as a number talks about a collaborative team where the number is more than 1. And that's the reason why the minimum number of 3 months is taken up as a cube factor.
All right, excellent. Well, Seshadri, thank you so much for the presentation. That's all the time that we have for. Again, we will be providing, if you did not get your questions answered, we will be providing a follow-up document within the next couple of weeks. And I want to thank everybody for coming out today to this webinar. Again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Scrum Alliance website and sent to you via email to those who have registered. If you have any questions about our webinars or other questions for Scrum Alliance, please email us at support@scrumalliance.org. And again, thank you so much, Sesh, for a great presentation. Everyone may now disconnect.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.